you're on.
Okay, my question is to all the candidates. Do you support the fair tax? In case you don't know what the fair tax is, the fair tax is a 23% consumption tax. It's simple, fair, voluntary, transparent, border neutral, and industry neutral. The fair tax will eliminate the bloated, incompetent IRS bureaucracy. It'll eliminate tax cheats.
Now, no campaigning.
I'm just explaining what the fair tax is. The fair tax will get rid of income taxes, income tax forms, corporate taxes, capital gains taxes, regressive payroll taxes. It'll keep the Social Security and Medicare in the black. It'll get rid of taxes on Social Security and Medicare.
Okay.
And well, the question is, do you support the fair tax? And if not, what program do you favor other than our current tax system, which is broken?
I guess I'll start. Sure. I can take that first. Actually, I've spoken a great deal about the fair tax. I've been talking with the Lee County Libertarian Party. I think the fair tax of all the alternative tax plans out there, it's the most interesting, and I think it's the most potentially feasible because it is in essence a progressive tax. While it is essentially a flat tax, what makes it progressive is that there's a rebate, and the rebate goes out to every single taxpayer, and it depends on how much they make. Now, there are a lot of problems with the possibility of actually implementing the fair tax, which I'm not sure can be resolved. But I would at least like to see the fair tax get its chance on the floor in Congress.
I'm sorry, I don't think it's fair. And this is why. As I understand the fair tax, and I can't get an answer from anybody that has researched it because their answer is, well, we don't know. As I understand the fair tax, when you buy a home for $100,000, you pay $123,000 for the home because there's a $23,000 tax. Well, everybody knows few people pay cash for a home, which means they're going to borrow $80,000 and next month they're going to make a mortgage payment. But there's no fair tax on that mortgage payment when 90% of it or better is interest. That means the banks get off scot-free.
There's no tax on a resale, only on new homes.
Yeah.
But when you buy insurance on your new home, there's no tax on the insurance companies. So the insurance companies get off scot-free. Then, when you go to the brokerage house and buy 1,000 shares of Google, you don't pay any tax on the 1,000 shares of Google. So now the brokerage houses get off scot-free. Now, name 3 larger vultures in this country. They're the banks, the insurance companies, and the brokerage houses. If I could figure a way to say the oil companies were getting off scot-free, I'd do that too. But when you go to the pump, you do pay sales tax and those kinds of things. So until somebody can answer my 4 questions about fair tax to my satisfaction, no, I'm sorry, I cannot support the fair tax.
The fair tax is good in name, and it has an appearance of being something that is simple. But at the end of the day, when you say you have to couple it with a rebate, that's where it complicates things. Because one of the things that the government does with the tax system is it creates incentive structures. You know, if it wants to have more development in alternative energy, for example, it's going to give you a tax break for that. So it's going to take away the ability of the government to establish incentives to do projects and direct the way we want to do things, for example, with alternative energy. One of the problems with that is that once you create a rebate, which is an exemption, what's going to stop the government from creating more rebates and more exemptions for different reasons? You know, if you have a flat tax, and that's it, flat tax, I can almost argue that that's fine, but it becomes a regressive tax system, and that's the problem with it. The second you start making one exemptions, you know how special interests are, and you know it's not going to be us that are getting the exemptions. It's going to be the people that have the money to lobby government, and they're the ones that are going to get the exemptions, and they're going to have great arguments for doing it. And chances are that at the end of the day, we're going to end up with just as complicated a tax system after a couple of years, even though we start off with something that sounded like a good idea. And that's my fear with the fair tax.
Thank you. Another question?
I can speak loudly enough, I think. Just a question about individual rights, church-state separation. Roe v. Wade support or non-support and other kinds of individual rights, which we have seen undercut time and time again by the present administration, sometimes with the support of conservative Democrats, which I'm very worried about too. Roe v. Wade, individual rights that we read about recently in the paper, and church-state separation. What do you think about these things?
Good question. Let's start in the middle now.
I support Roe v. Wade as settled law. I believe in the separation of church and state. In fact, any churches that would presume to exercise political influence over the process should lose their 501c3 exemption, and your contributions to that church are no longer deductible, but they are rather not deductible to you and taxable to the church. And I believe in the right to privacy, the right to bear arms. The Patriot Act has been intrusive and distasteful to me, and I will work to support Roe v. Wade, support the separation of church and state, keep the right to bear arms in full force, and what was that fourth one? I forgot it already.
You did a good job.
But the other one, as I said before.
Thank you.
Same. But even beyond that, Joe is somebody that when he was the director of the Cuban American National Foundation and Bill Clinton did stuff that he didn't agree with, he stood up to Bill Clinton and he challenged Bill Clinton. Obviously with this president, he's had many more opportunities to stand up and object to what he's done. But Joe's always been a person that has an independent mind, and he's gonna do what he thinks is right. Beyond just, he's not gonna be a rubber stamp for even President Obama. He's gonna represent the people of the 25th District of Florida.
Thanks.
I think we're all in agreement here. I agree pretty much with the other two gentlemen here. One thing that I think is worth noting, this is actually a question I get a lot. Normally, it doesn't always come up, but I am in fact of a minority religion. I am a Muslim. And so when I tell people that, the first question that people always ask me is, well, are you in support of Sharia law? And the answer to that is no, absolutely not. I think the fundamental principles of the separation of church and state that this nation was founded on both protect the majority of citizens from undue religious encroachment, and by the same token, it protects religions from government involvement. So again, I think we all agree on all of these issues.
Time from someone else.
They didn't answer my question.
I'm sorry, we'll have to get to them separately.
My question is, what stance is your candidate?
Can't hear you.
What's your stance on the privatization of governmental services like I-75 and who knows what in the future? How do you feel about that?
That's a hot issue in our papers these days. How do you feel about the privatization of I-75? Yes or no?
That's a big no for me. In general, whenever you're talking about essential public services, more than likely these services are never profitable unless you charge too much or you deny these services. This is true of public roadways. This is also true of healthcare as well.
Remember the deficit we were talking about earlier? The deficit has sucked out those valuable resources that we could use to maintain and improve our infrastructure. And our infrastructure is crumbling. Example, the bridge that collapsed in Minneapolis. And it's crumbling for a reason. It has not been properly cared for in the past 8 years. And I know why. And I think you probably know why too. So I cannot support privatizing things that are for use by all of us because it is not maintained properly. Turn it over to private. Remember, private business is not in business to do public service. They're in business to make money. And if you allow them to make money, they'll do it. So we should keep our resources. It's not the privatized interstate highway system. What is it? It's the Eisenhower interstate highway system. Do you remember when Dwight Eisenhower started the interstate system? Every dollar they put into that system returned $7 in commerce. Commerce is the exclusive domain of the United States Congress, and we need to take it back from those people who have presumed to interrupt it.
What I know and what Joe knows.
We're going to ask you to stand up if you would, so they can know who's speaking.
Sure. What we know of the individual plans, we would be against. In general, privatization of roads is generally not a good idea. I'm not going to say a blanket statement that privatization is never good, because if somebody comes along and says they're going to do it for free and they're going to keep it updated and everything, I think, and I can also regulate them and make sure that they do it, then I think I might take that deal. In that sense, I think you have to, it's kind of like baseball stadium issues, Are you against them or for them? It depends on the plan. Do you want this job or this other job? It depends on what the actual job is. But in general, privatization of infrastructure is not a good idea. We would be against that.
Thank you. I'm sorry, but we want to get to other questions. We're not going back to the fair tax right now.
You didn't answer my question completely on the first one. I said, if you're not for the flat tax, then what are you for?
Thank you. Okay.
They didn't answer the two gentlemen over there.
Let's see if we have time at the end, if we can get to some other questions, and then if we can come back to that, we will. Is there another question?
I have one question for all gentlemen. We heard about the gerrymandering of voting districts. If your candidate or if you yourself were elected, how would you presume to redraw these districts?
You stay on your side.
It's a state issue, but let's say that we're running for state office. I think you'd have to create a system. Iowa has a pretty decent system where you wouldn't divide communities. Specifically, one of the reasons the 25th district actually purposely divides communities, and the reason he does that is because communities can create leaders, and that means challengers. So if you divide the communities, you have a lack of competition. And I think in politics you need to have competition. The more competition you have, the better leaders you have. And I would definitely have a system where you would have to respect the boundaries of the different communities.
In addition to asking that, do you think a district should run from the East Coast to the West Coast, or are they different enough so they shouldn't be together?
Well, in that sense, you would only have one district from Miami, because it might be considered by a lot of people more different than the rest of Florida. but I mean, in general, I think it has more to do with making sure that I would take it out. It needs to be depoliticized, and it needs to not be used as a tool to maintain power, and it needs to be a way. Look, the problem with gerrymandering, and it's the problem with the 25th district, is that he chose the voters. The voters didn't choose him, and that's what has to be changed.
For this district, for District 14, I think if it were up to me, again, it's a matter of preserving the communities. My guess is probably if we included Golden Gate in District 14, we could do away with that little sliver of Charlotte County that we have, Boca Grande, and make sure that that's included up in the Port Charlotte district.
As mentioned earlier, that redistricting is a state issue. So it's drawn in Tallahassee, it's not drawn by the United States House of Representatives. But that having been said, if you will elect me as your congressman in 2010, in June of 2010, I'll be here in Naples supporting your candidates for State House. I'll be campaigning shoulder to shoulder with them to get fair-minded, like-minded people elected to the State House so that we can redraw the lines and the voters choose their representatives, not the representatives choose their voters.
Thank you.
There's been, my next question is regarding the veterans who are serving in the armed forces as they are now in a George Bush war. And my question is, what types of programs would you be supporting? I know that there was a recent vote with regard to the GI Bill. So to the candidates, all the three of you, I'd like to know what your position is in providing for our young men and women who are serving in the armed forces.
Who's first? You go ahead, it's fine.
I continue to be offended at how the Bush administration has treated our veterans, those people on whom we have leaned to support our freedoms and defend our freedoms in a place where maybe it wasn't even necessary to be done. So when these folks come back, I believe that they ought to have portable benefits. If they live here in Southwest Florida and want to travel to the Northeast or to the West Coast of the United States, they should have an identification card that says, I'm a veteran. And if they need medical treatment, they ought to be able to walk into any hospital, any doctor's office, any pharmacy, and be recognized as a veteran and get the treatment that they need. Likewise, if they live in the Northeast or in the Midwest and they come down here to visit, and you know, we have a lot of people like that. If you build a brick and mortar hospital, it's going to stay in the Midwest. It will not come with them. But when they come down here, now we have a large influx of veterans that can't get health care because the veterans clinic is full. They're booked out 14 months. So I want to give them that ID card that issues them their benefits that are portable. They take it to their doctor, they take it to their pharmacy, they take it to their hospital, and they're recognized and served. In order to promote doctors specializing in things that may be intrinsic to our veterans, maybe we should give doctors a little cut on their student loans. Say, if you learn about these things that are happening to our veterans in the Gulf War and in the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan, then we're going to give you a little cut on your student loans in exchange for treating our veterans. And our veterans can get the very best. Same way with education, our veterans ought to be entitled to and supported with the best education we can offer them when they return. Don't get me started about veterans.
Yeah, this is a real disgusting problem. We tend to, I think, as Robert pointed out, we put such a burden on the people who are currently serving and on our veterans, and yet we don't provide for them when they come back. And healthcare for veterans is certainly an essential issue. Also, what we see is veteran benefits and also active duty military benefits are being cut across the board, almost wherever they can. We see the issue that you mentioned with the GI Bill, where they're basically reneging or putting qualifiers on the use of the GI Bill that weren't initially there when these soldiers and airmen and sailors enlisted. What we have to do first and foremost is we have to address the war that they're actually fighting in, because until we do something about bringing the troops in Iraq home and resolving the situation in Afghanistan and making sure that we don't blunder into another mess in Iran, we're going to continue to have a problem with more and more of these veterans. The second thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that the veterans have a voice in Congress besides just patriotic platitudes and calling them heroes. We need to make sure that there is somebody who's continually out there, who's upfront, who is making sure that the veterans aren't forgotten.
Our opponent, Mario Diaz-Balart, voted against the new GI Bill, and he's also been 100% supporter of Iran.
I would be in favor of tolerance. I would be in favor of everybody being able to exercise their own religion, their own sexuality, their own educational preferences without interference from narrow-minded people with, what do they call those things that the horses wear when they're racing? Blinders? It just is offensive to me. And I can remember a time when I was much more narrow-minded than I am now. And I'm grateful that I have learned to be more tolerant. And I hope that you too will join me in being more tolerant, and we won't have to worry about asking and telling.
When I was in the military, I can't believe it's almost 20 years ago, this was a question that came up frequently. And one of the big arguments that opponents of allowing gay and lesbian soldiers to serve act openly was that other soldiers wouldn't accept them. Recently, late last year, there was a survey done with active duty members of the military, and over 70% of those surveyed said that they have no problem whatsoever serving with gay and lesbian soldiers. So I think that any restriction on them serving in the military, it's well past time that we get rid of it.
lot of the folks in this club are very concerned about issues like Medicare, and you've already addressed those. The other one that concerns us frequently is Social Security benefits. And we have been told by our current administration that that program is significantly in danger of running out of money, and sooner perhaps than we think. Do you have any plans? Well, we have one plan, I know, thank you, that's been expressed that relates to health care. But now I'd like to talk about Social Security. What plans do you have to fund it and make it fiscally secure for those of us that get its benefits and soon get its benefits?
Okay, fine. Why don't you go ahead and start? Thanks.
The situation of Social Security, that is correct. It is certainly running out of money, and this is often referred to as the third rail of politics because nobody wants to address this, I think, in a realistic manner. There are a couple of things that we have to do with Social Security. First of all, I think that we can raise the salary caps. I believe they're currently around 80,000 at that point. People stop contributing to Social Security. Is that correct? It's a little higher. 97. Yeah, we can raise that so that we have more money coming into it. The other thing that we're going to have to do, and I know this sounds painful to a lot of people, and I think most of the individuals in the room this will affect, but we need to look at actually raising the age that benefits are available for future generations. I'm talking a minimum of 20, 30, 40 years down the road. People actually in my age bracket are younger. Look at retiring a few years older because, of course, the life expectancy is longer now. Again, I know this isn't always a popular solution, but there is a major fiscal reality that we have to look at here.
I think Social Security has its problems. So the first thing I want to do is make it fiscally responsible for young people. When Social Security started, we collected the tax, and the same day, if necessary, we paid the benefits. And they built up a trust fund, and now because the baby boomers are starting to retire, that trust fund is in danger of evaporating because it has not been invested for as long as it needs to be invested to provide the benefits to those who are retiring. So what I want to do is whack off the 15-year-olds and down and say, okay, you're in a new program. Your Social Security tax is going to be put aside and it will be invested for you. We can't send it to Wall Street. You know why? The vultures on Wall Street will be circling ready for that new money to come in. We can't do that. But here's what we'll do with it. We'll make it available by congressional district to provide for infrastructure needs. So every week when the payroll taxes are paid, that money is kept right here in the 14th or the 25th Congressional District. If we need to widen I-75, then the people of the 14th Congressional District can vote at the polls for a general obligation bond, which they agree to repay, and we can borrow from that fund money to widen I-75, $500 million, $700 million, whatever it takes. We pay that back. And by the time that 15-year-old gets to be 65 or 68 or what the full retirement age is at the time, that money will have been paid back with interest, secured by general obligation bonds payable by everybody in the district, and that will solve the problem for the young people. Now, it doesn't solve the problem for the rest of us. So what we've got to do is we've got to remember that we were the ones that didn't fund that Social Security pool properly. We didn't set it aside to grow. So now we need to expect to have to pay some extra taxes to fund Social Security to the limits that we provided and in accordance with our agreement with the people of the United States of America. That's a contract and it needs to be honored. So we're all going to have to reach in our pockets to pay it. Now, if you want to be angry at your parents, because remember, they didn't pay their share either. And so now I'm going to have to kick in to cover up what my parents didn't pay. And once we get these 15-year-olds who are in the new program to retirement age, the program will be fiscally sound. It will be just like an annuity with a 5A plus, AAA plus insurance company. and it'll work. But it takes a long time to implement that. It doesn't happen in the 2-year term of a congressman. So I'll have to run for re-election in 2010, I guess.
I'm actually going to disagree with the gentleman. I actually think that the whole Social Security argument is a Republican scare tactic. The estimates, the most conservative estimates, is that Social Security is going to run out of money in 2049, which is 41 years from now. That's a long time. And there aren't that many government programs that have lasted 40 years. This one started, even more years before. This is one of the most successful government programs that this country has ever created. The fact that it's going to run out in 49 has more to do with Bush raiding the Social Security Trust Fund than any age limit or any tax that needs to be put on there. If we stopped raiding the Social Security Trust Fund, we would be fine. We would be okay. The Medicaid is a different story. That one's actually much more fit, in a much more precarious fiscal situation. But there are different things that we can do that are going to be a lot. If we just stop raiding it, it's going to be, and that's the 2049 is actually the most conservative estimate. Honestly, there was a Krugman article this morning in the New York Times that talked about it. And some of the other estimates that are done by nonpartisan, it goes into 2060. Which I consider myself a young person. I don't even know if I'm ready for 2060. So I mean, it's in decent shape right now. It can always be improved, and it always can be better, but we don't have to cut any type of any benefits. I don't think we have to raise the retirement age right now. And I think if we just stop rating the trust fund, as I said before, we'll be fine for even beyond 2060.
I'm two gentlemen over there. Please honor my question and answer.
No, I'm sorry, but we're not going to do that. You may talk to them separately after, but we've gotten the discussion on fair tax already, and we're not going to go back to the second question.
Okay, but I just want to say this, the fair tax will keep Social Security.
Thank you. I'm sorry, but you're out of order, and we appreciate it, and you're out of order. Thank you. I want to thank everybody very much. I want to thank our panelists very much for coming. This has been terrific, and we really appreciate it. We wish you all luck, and please come back to our meetings in the future.
Our Democratic candidates are certainly welcome to hang around and chat with the folks here. Jeff, we appreciate you attending, but we're going to have to ask you to leave at this point, because we're now about to deal with purely Democratic business.
The classified stuff, got it. Go ahead, cut the camera.
It's a good progressive agenda.
The problem I've had with the Democrats is that I have not been particularly impressed with the national leadership
Oh.
the last few years. So, I don't care about running in 2002, and I was actually involved with the Green Party. That didn't quite work out. Yes. Okay, thanks. But we'll see. The big question now is.
See, I thought you would come from the Republican side. I didn't.
I come more from the progressive side.
Okay.
And I think there's also. In this district, I think for this particular election, there's a real issue of electability because
there always is.
We have Mr. Neal has ran twice, and both times he ran as the only other opponent.
Mm-hmm.
This year, we have 4 names on the ballot. And of course, he's picking up the Democratic votes, but he's also picking up the protest vote. He's picking up the independents. So this year we've really got to look at who has the best chance of beating Connie Mack. And that's the most important thing, and that was the main contributing factor into why I'm an independent.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I enjoyed it. I'm glad
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate you having me.
Okay. Sure.
Take care. Which way did she just go at?
I think she's not that way.
Oh, okay. Thanks. No problem. Oh, you didn't grab the folder?
Oh, that's all right. You sure?
Yeah. Hi, how you doing?
As an independent?
What's that?
Are you running as an independent?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I have your bio and all. Lahini, I'm an
Nice to meet you, Lahini.
Obama fellow. I'm coming.
Oh, okay.
Just drove down from Jersey.
From Jersey?
Yes, and came up to do the work. So how do you feel about Mr. Obama and his campaign?
I have a lot of optimism about Senator Obama. I think that he's got, like I said, I think he's got a real chance of not only winning this, but doing a lot of good.
Have you openly supported him?
At the moment, right now, the issue is I need to see where I stand with the Democrats here in this district. Officially, I haven't endorsed any candidate. I want to focus on the congressional race, but I have a feeling that's going to change in the next few months, if not sooner. Again, it all depends on how things go with the Democrats in this district, and also we'll see what comes out of the conventions and everything.
Okay, well, I'm going to be here for a month and a half. I would love to keep in touch with your party and what you're doing, your campaign.
Just have, this doesn't have my cell phone number on it. This is my cell phone number.
How are you doing thus far?
What's that?
How is your campaign doing?
We're actually doing really well.
What is the local feel for it?
We've been going out actually since November. We've been talking to basically every group, political, non-political, pen back to that will actually have us. And the vibe has been really good. Now what we need to work on over the next few months is really getting the message out on a broader scale, because we've been going out and talking to smaller groups. So we've done well there.
Well, we're here in Naples. I don't really know the area really well. I think it's 84 or 64. What is that throughway, that big main street? It's a 4 in there somehow.
Which one is that?
41?
No, the one that's Naples.
Was that? I think that's 84.
84, yes.
I used to live here. I live in Fort Myers, so.
Okay. And I would like for you to call on us if you need us.
Do you have a card?
I don't have a card. That's my biggest default.
Let me just go ahead.
Actually, if you take my number, I'm going to try to sell you a painting. I sell paintings for a living. I run a non-profit, and one of the things we do is we have Project Branch, where we have member artists. They are professional master painters with no outlet. So in a way, I'm their outlet. So I traveled with 12 master paintings at my disposal, at yours, for viewing. You're not committed to buy. But if you would just look, that that means someone else saw the artist's work, and that my job is done.
Well, I can definitely look, but you're talking to the wrong guy for buying art right now. I'm more than broke.
My goal is to look.
But yeah, I'd love to take a look at it.
My objective is to have people view these art pieces. It's not necessarily, the further goal is to have them sold, but just to have proper eyes view them, I would be happy.
I'd love to. I do a lot of digital art myself. So.
Do you really? Yes, you do. Yes, you. And I've heard of your documentary. I've actually heard.
Oh, really?
Yes,
That's
I
great.
have. I'm pretty well, I guess, grounded as a person. My name is Lahini Pierre. Lahini Pierre. And this is my cellular. And I love the fact that you're single. Call me whatever. I do. And you should,
Thanks.
You should really capitalize on that.
Well, we'll see what we can do. It was nice meeting you, Lahini.
It was really nice.
I'll be in touch with you.
Same here.
Ready?
Did you have to photo to videotape?
He's got to videotape everything. I make him do it.
Yeah. Great. Now I'm on video.
Take care, Lahini.
Right now.
You too.